Jesus, boys, girls, in betweeners, Red Gambit here, back with another mix-up. What, so soon? Yes, because we got something to talk about here, and it's called Season 3.5, What the Hell? Because Season 3.5 has been upon us for several days now, and the dust is finally beginning to settle on the latest patch. People are having thoughts and opinions, and they're not good. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty about this patch, obviously changes for the characters, mechanics, things like that, it's worth mentioning that this patch by itself has brought along a host of pretty unwelcome changes. We've got bugs with characters appearing in their default T-pose, Nikali's V-trigger not activating in combos against certain characters, and the one that affects me most of all is that mods don't work if you use particular mod managers. You gotta go with a very roundabout way of doing mods now, which is a real pain in the butt. So it's not off to the greatest start, let's put it that way. Now, beyond that, let's just have a quick look at the history of the patches. Now, Street Fighter V started out massively unbalanced, which is fair, you'd expect that with a fighting game. No one gets it right on the first try, so we appreciate that. And it's been gradually working its way towards balance by nerfing characters more and not buffering, more than buffing really. I mean, we've just talked about this on the mix-up before, where you have your different approaches. You can either buff all the weak characters or nerf all the strong ones, and the former is the more fun option, which is what we were all kind of hoping for, but they've really been going more with a latter option, that they'll give some weak characters some minor buffs, but they'll really just hit the stronger ones with a nerf bat for the most part. Some of the universal changes that we've seen in the past, we've seen anti-air jabs being systematically, over the course of multiple patches, removed from the game. They still exist in Season 3.5, but they're in a very limited capacity at the moment. It's very difficult, unless it's an absolute point-blank range, to really get away with an AA jab, compared to Season 1, where they were just the default go-to anti-air tech. Throw loops have been removed as well over the course of those patches, and Option Select Tech has been removed whenever it's appeared. Now, Option Select Tech was basically a mission statement from Capcom from the get-go. They said, we do not want this game to have option selects we feel takes away from the guessing game of the meta, so anytime the option selects have actually sprung up, they've been stamped out pretty quickly, which I don't really have too much of a problem with. And invincible moves costing meter, because initially in Season 1 there was 4 different characters that had DPs that were invincible without using meter, and they got removed in Season 2, I think it was 2 or 2.5, but they were removed pretty early as well. So they've been moving away from having these kind of strong tools and trying to have a much more balanced overall cast. However, in the process of all these changes, you can kind of see where this is going. And one of the big draw cards of Street Fighter V is that it started out as a game that rewarded taking small to medium risks in order to earn big damage, because, let's face it, anti-airs are not much of a deterrent when you can jump in and get a meterless 200 to 300 damage in combos for most characters. I mean, that's a pretty good trade-off. You can jump in 4, 5, 6 times and get anti-air normaled every single time, but if on the 7th time you land that combo, you have basically cancelled out any life advantage that your opponent had in one fell swoop. And on top of that, the game initially discouraged zoning and defensive play. It was really obvious from the get-go that basically if you were a character who had fireballs, you would have a lot of recovery on those firewalls. A lot of characters initially at the start of the game had, if you tried to use a fireball at point blank range, unless you were prepared to spend some meter on it, it was not safe. Whereas in a game like Street Fighter 4, there was block strings that Ryu, Ken, everyone else had, where you could just end in a fireball and it was fine. You could just do crouching medium fireball and you were safe. That was it, because the fireball by itself was safe. Whereas they didn't want that in Street Fighter V. They wanted fireballs to be quite unsafe, so they couldn't be used as a keep away tool, and it was a great idea. I really did approve of that when I first heard about it, because it promotes that aggression, which is what we really want to see. But instead, like I said, it's moving towards this very spacing and poking heavy meta, which is much more reminiscent of Street Fighter 4, where games weren't decided so much by big combos or any kind of mix-ups. They were really decided by the death by 1,000 cuts approach, where you would just literally poke your opponent to death with the occasional combo in between to spice things up. Okay, Season 3.5. I'm not going to bore you to death with all the nitty-gritty of this one. I want to talk about some of the more global things. So the biggest global change was the global nerf to crush counter damage, which is largely due to characters who can easily fish for crush counters in neutral and convert them into big damage off something as minor as a whiff normal. And, you know, a lot of characters were good at this. Karin was good at this, Ken was good at this, plenty of others were. You could just fish around neutral, get a crush counter, and then move in for a big conversion. Now, in my mind, this is not the way to handle this. Because it was only really a handful of characters who were quite guilty of this, everyone could do it, but there's only a small amount who could really get that big damage off something as minor as fishing for something in neutral. I don't think that that was a good thing. I think that what Capcom did by removing the 90% integer between 100% and 80 in the combo scaling is really a very shotgun approach to solving this. They're just trying to cover as many bases as possible with as least effort. It smacks of being lazy, in my opinion, and I don't think it was a good way to do it. If it were up to me personally, I think that crush counters, if you really want to just nerf crush counters working in that neutral game and just have them as punishers, take them out of neutral completely. Do not have crush counters as an option in neutral for converting them off with normals. Make that so crush counters work as a deterrent for taking big risks. So if you take a big risk on a wake up shuriken or something like that, you get your crush counter punish on that, but they don't work when you're fishing around in the neutral space. I think that that's a much more, to my mind, reasonable way of approaching this, and it removes their efficacy in footsies completely. Now, beyond all this, 3.5 is one of the most, let's be honest, confusing balance patches that at least I personally have ever seen in a game. As I said before, the whole patch smacks of laziness. It's filled with incredibly confusing decisions. Now, like I said, I'm not going to go over all the character changes because that would take far too long, and plenty of other people have done it already, and I've talked about Juri at length in 2 separate videos. But 3.5 is a mess of balance changes. Now, as a caveat, I will say that the majority did receive some pretty reasonable changes with Abigail, Rashid, Guile, Akuma. They've all received pretty significant nerfs to their, what basically made them amazing. So that's good. That's what a patch should do. That's moving in the right direction. However, where things get confusing is on the opposite end of that spectrum. You got characters like Fang, Ed, and Juri, characters who are in no planet, and in no place in space and time was anyone considering these characters to be high tier, still receiving nerfs for some reason. It boggles the mind. What was the logic behind these changes? How could anyone possibly look at any of these characters, not just Juri, and consider them to be too strong enough to warrant these kind of changes? It is just massively confusing and aggravating for players of those characters. Now, obviously, I do have a little bit of a personal bias in Juri. There are some people who have mentioned that they don't feel the changes to Juri are really that bad, and I don't think they're that bad either. The point is that she shouldn't have received any. And that same goes for like Fang. Fang received a nerf to his V-Reversal. He can't actually safely use V-Reversal even when it successfully connects. They can be jabbed on the other side of it. It's insane. Why are we getting these changes for characters who are mid-tier at best? And in addition to that, we've also got Sakura and Zeku, 2 characters that were frankly buffed into the stratosphere. These are now potential new top tiers to replace those on the way out. Obviously, we won't know, people were predicting that Abigail would just dominate tournaments, and don't get me wrong, he did dominate tournaments, but he wasn't actually winning that many tournaments, so we're gonna have to wait and see how that shakes out, but they are both gonna be very strong in Season 3.5. And lastly, we've got the elephant in the room, the 500-pound gorilla. We've got Menat, and you guessed it, we got Cammy. Now, Menat was already a strong character, there's no question about that. She wasn't necessarily top tier, but she did receive some pretty significant buffs here. And on top of that, this is the most confusing of all, is Cammy. Cammy received buffs out the arse in this patch. She did receive some small nerfs. She got the token nerfs like everyone does in a patch, so we can't ignore that. But in particular, Cammy is a character since day one who has been buffed consistently with every single patch of the game, like she is somehow not good enough. She's even been given completely new moves in different patches. And now we're at the point where Capcom looked at her and said, no, not good enough yet. She's not where we want her to be yet. She's still not a complete fucking Tyrannosaurus tearing through this game like it's fucking Jurassic Park. So, what the hell? That's really the question that sums up all this, because A vast majority of the FGC is up in arms around the changes. There have been many prominent people like Xian, Infiltration, and others publicly venting their confusion and frustration with what I've just mentioned. The confusion around why is this? What were the decisions? Why were the decisions? What was the mindset behind these changes? They seem so arbitrary and strange that it's gotten to the point where already we're only 1 week in and people are beginning to speculate that there's some kind of agenda at play. Like I said, who could honestly say that Cammy wasn't already top tier, or at the very least top 5? Conspiracy theories are already beginning to rear their ugly head like it's some kind of episode of InfoWars with Alex Jones. And talk of character bias within the fighting game community and division, more importantly of Capcom, are running pretty rampant. And honestly, I don't believe that is necessarily the case. It seems like a little bit too simple of an answer that people within Capcom's fighting division just like a particular character more, and they have the power within the company to make them stronger. If I was going to put on my tinfoil hat, and I will for a moment, my personal theory is that this is a push by Capcom to ensure that characters who have mass appeal are more prominent at tournaments and as a result can bring in more viewers and increase the esports profile. For example, Sakura came in #1 in the character poll that was run last year by Capcom, and Cammy is a ubiquitous face of Street Fighter who's right up there with Chun, Ryu, and Ken in terms of just blanket recognition in terms of the Street Fighter brand. Now, like I said, before you get angry in the comments, put your pitchforks down, because this is just a theory. I have no evidence whatsoever to substantiate any evidence of this, but it is a theory. It's the only theory I can really think of, because the only other answer is that Capcom are just fucking dumb and don't know how to balance their own game. So, in conclusion, 3.5 is a fucking mess. I don't think anyone is really disagreeing on that, and it's unlikely to be rebalanced until the end of 2018 if 2017 was any indication of what Capcom's plans are. And I have to say, for the first time, I'm actually quite concerned about the direction this game is going. It's, as we said in the introduction, it's moving away from being an exciting spectacle fighter that rewards aggression and taking risks, and is heading towards being a slower, spacing and poke-based fighter that rewards playing consistently and cautiously over going for something that's going to be a big risk for big damage. And while nothing can be proven, balancing is incompetence at worst and a case of collusion to promote characters and profitability over the full game experience. So, in either case, it's a terrible situation for the game to be in. It's honestly gotten to the point where already prominent community figures like Ultra David, the other half of Ultra David and James Chen, have gone as far as to suggest that public testing, or at least pro-player consultation, to avoid another debacle like this occurring is actually necessary, which, to my mind, is not a bad idea. I mean, you know, if we want to take an example from another genre, you know, Blizzard have the public test realm for any changes to Overwatch, things like that, and I think that if Capcom can't be trusted to actually make good decisions in terms of balancing this game, that is going to be something that we really seriously need to consider pressuring them into doing, because if they keep doing this, it's going to damage not just the brand of the game, it's going to damage the faith that you and I have in it, which is going to be a situation that they cannot come back from if that occurs. So what do you think? What do you think of Season 3.5? Is it a mess? Is it a debacle? Or is this situation being blown out of proportion? Are you a Cammy main and you feel that she actually needs these buffs because she's very difficult to play and has no through loop? Things like that. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. I will respond to every single person, as I always do. Remember, obviously, if you enjoyed, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like if you want to see more videos like this. And in the meantime, kisses, hugs, belly rubs. I will see all of you very soon.